I came home to an evening that felt oddly surreal. Amanda had returned from her business trip just a few hours ago, and instead of the usual mix of exhaustion and endless complaints about delayed flights or annoying colleagues, she was radiating a happiness that bordered on the eerie. I've known Amanda for 15 years now. She's a 38-year-old powerhouse with a fierce wit and an unfiltered way of expressing herself. Normally, when she comes back from work trips, she's frazzled, with her eyes a little too tired and her mind still half on the airplane. Tonight, though, nothing about her appearance or behavior matched that pattern. When she stepped through the door, it wasn't the tired Amanda I expected to see. She was smiling, almost as if she'd been let in on a secret too wonderful to keep to herself. Instead of her typical barrage of stories, ranting about a rude colleague or venting about the endless stream of emails waiting for her on her laptop, she barely acknowledged my presence. I stood there, heart pounding with a mix of relief that she was home and confusion about this new, unnerving version of her. I couldn't help but notice the small details. The way her eyes glinted with an inexplicable brightness, the way she moved as if each step was a quiet celebration of some newfound joy, and the fact that she didn't even glance in my direction. Normally, I'd be greeted with an animated discussion about every little thing that happened on her trip, but tonight, her gaze was fixed somewhere else, lost in thoughts I couldn't decipher. I tried to make casual conversation, asking about her flight and if her colleagues had been as frustrating as usual. But she only offered a soft, mysterious smile and a nod before retreating into the kitchen as if drawn by some silent, irresistible invitation. Even more bizarre, her phone and laptop sat untouched on the coffee table, a shocking departure from her habitual need to immediately catch up on every email or message the moment she stepped inside. It wasn't that Amanda was being rude. It was something else entirely. There was an otherworldly calm about her, a calm that felt almost rehearsed. In that moment, I couldn't shake the feeling that her happiness was masking something deeper, something that defied our everyday routine. The usual fatigue that accompanies long trips was conspicuously absent, replaced by an energy that felt both invigorating and unsettling. I kept questioning myself. Had something happened on this trip that I wasn't privy to? Was there an experience or a revelation that had transformed her, or was I overthinking a simple change in her routine? Every instinct in me screamed that this wasn't just a refreshed state of mind from a restful vacation. It was as if Amanda had been altered somehow, her inner self rearranged into a version I didn't quite recognize. Sitting there, watching her disappear into the kitchen with that secretive smile, I felt a mixture of hope and apprehension. Hope that maybe this newfound happiness was the sign of a breakthrough for her, and apprehension that it might signal something else, something that could change everything between us. And so, I sat there in the dim light of our living room, wondering what the real story was behind her unusual behavior, and whether I was ready to face whatever twist this return might bring. I sat across from Amanda at our small kitchen table, trying to mask the knot of apprehension in my stomach. I casually asked, "How's San Francisco?" expecting one of her usual detailed, weary accounts of endless meetings and tedious flights. Instead, she paused, just a brief, frozen moment, before replying in a tone that was overly rehearsed. Full, constant meetings, I didn't even have time to rest. Something in her response felt off. I'd come home to her uncharacteristic, almost unnerving happiness, and now this bland, clinical answer couldn't possibly match the spark I'd seen earlier. My mind raced back to a disturbing discovery from a few days ago, a snapshot I'd stumbled upon while scrolling through social media on my phone. In that photo, Amanda wasn't in San Francisco at all. Instead, she was at a lavish 5-star resort in the Bahamas, laughing with a stranger in a chic bar, her eyes alight with a thrill that was far too genuine for mere work fatigue. I swallowed hard, trying to steady the turmoil churning inside me. Without a word, I retrieved my phone and scrolled through until I found that very image. I held it up across the table and silently watched her reaction. The change was instantaneous. Her confident facade melted away into a flash of something raw and unmistakable, a mixture of shock, guilt, and an emotion I couldn't quite pin down. It was as if the very air around her had shifted, the mask of poise slipping off to reveal a vulnerability she'd worked so hard to hide. For a long, agonizing minute, neither of us spoke. I could feel every second stretch out, heavy with unasked questions. How long had this been going on? Was the Bahamas trip a one-off? Or had there been more than just a stray dalliance? My mind raced with possibilities, each one more unsettling than the last. The picture, innocent in its own right, had become a silent accusation, a truth that stood in stark opposition to her carefully crafted narrative. I could see the conflict in her eyes, a brief, desperate search for an escape, or perhaps an apology that never formed into words. The vibrant joy from earlier had vanished, replaced by something darker and all too human. I couldn't tell if she was calculating her next move or simply trying to understand how everything had spiraled out of control. All I knew was that her answer about San Francisco was a lie, and that the photo was irrefutable evidence of a reality far removed from the one she'd just described. Sitting there in the dim glow of our kitchen, I felt the weight of betrayal and confusion pressing down on me. The silence between us was thick, punctuated only by the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the soft ticking of the wall clock. A constant reminder that time was slipping away, and with it, any chance for simple, honest explanations. In that charged moment, as I stared at her in the flickering light, I realized that nothing about tonight was going to be as it seemed. I could feel the tension coil tighter around us as I held up my phone with trembling fingers. The room was heavy with silence when Amanda suddenly jerked upright, her eyes widening, as if she'd been caught off guard by a stray dog. "Oh my God, Lucas, what is this? Are you following me?" she blurted out, her voice laced with panic. The accusation hung in the air, charged and incredulous. I leaned forward, my own voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "Answer me, what is this?" Her initial burst of shock melted into a rehearsed calm as she tried to deflect. "It's nothing, Lucas. It was just a friendly conversation," she insisted, her tone too light, too casual to match the gravity of the situation. I could see her eyes flickering, darting about the room as if searching for a way to vanish. And I knew she wasn't buying her own story. I wasn't ready to let her story go unchallenged. Slowly, I swiped to the next photo, the one that left no room for her casual explanation. There, crystal clear on the screen, was Amanda by a shimmering pool, sitting astride the same man from the earlier picture. The setting was undeniably luxurious, the kind of place you'd only see in glossy magazines or on vacation blogs. But what struck me most was the stark contrast in her expression. Gone was the laugh or the playful smirk. In its place was a look of dismay and desperation, as if she'd just realized that every carefully guarded secret was now laid bare. "Amanda," I said, my voice soft but edged with hurt, "this isn't just a friendly conversation. Who is he really?" The question wasn't new. It had been burning in the back of my mind since I first saw that picture, but now it was impossible to ignore. For a moment, she didn't answer. Instead, her eyes roamed the room, flicking from the scattered items that had once represented our shared life. A framed photo on the mantel, the half-finished cup of coffee on the table. To me, as if hoping that somewhere among these familiar relics lay an escape route. Her face was a mask of conflicting emotions. Fear, guilt, and something else I couldn't quite decipher. A plea for understanding, perhaps, or a silent admission of deeper secrets. She tried again, her voice quavering as she attempted to dismiss the gravity of the evidence. "It was just a chance encounter, Lucas. I met him at the bar. We talked, that's all. Nothing more than a harmless conversation." Her words were too brittle, too rehearsed, as if she'd memorized this line in anticipation of this very moment. But the second photo said otherwise. It was undeniable proof that this wasn't a random, fleeting meeting. It was an encounter that carried an intimacy that went far beyond mere words and polite smiles. Every instinct in me screamed that I was standing on the precipice of something far more complex than a simple betrayal. Had she been leading a double life all along? Was this a one-time lapse, or had it been a long, hidden dalliance that I had never suspected? The questions swirled in my mind like dark, unanswerable riddles, each one deepening the chasm between what I thought I knew and the reality now unfolding before me. I couldn't help but feel that there was something else at play, an undercurrent of secrets and half-truths that had been building for a long time. Her desperate glances, her jittery movements, they weren't just signs of guilt over a single mistake. They hinted at a pattern, a network of lies that might extend far beyond this one encounter. It was as if the very foundations of our relationship were built on stories she told me, each one now crumbling under the weight of evidence. My heart pounded in my chest as I waited for her to speak again, hoping against hope that this time the truth would come out. But as silence stretched on, punctuated only by the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of a car passing by outside, I realized that I was no longer speaking to the woman I thought I knew. In that charged moment, with my questions echoing in the stillness, I sensed that every word, every gesture from now on, would lead us further down a path lined with more twists and hidden corners. Corners where the truth lay waiting, patient and unforgiving, ready to shatter the illusions we'd built. I trailed Amanda as she bolted toward the bedroom, her hurried movements filled with a strange, almost desperate indifference. I knew something was off the moment she began pulling items from her suitcase in a flurry, her face set in a mask of casual nonchalance. But even as she pretended to be sorting through clothes for some mundane reason, I couldn't ignore the way her hands fumbled to hide something among the neatly folded garments. Without a word, I moved closer. I couldn't let this go. Not now. Not when every instinct screamed that the truth was unraveling before my eyes. I reached out and started pushing aside the pile of clothes. That's when I saw them, a pair of red lace panties. They were not her size, and the realization hit me like a tidal wave. The room fell into a tense, suffocating silence, the kind where every tick of the clock echoed the shattering of trust. In that charged moment, Amanda's expression shifted abruptly. The fear I'd seen in her eyes earlier now morphed into something else. A strange, defiant amusement. With an unsettling laugh that rang hollow against the weight of the evidence, she blurted out, "This is a gift for you, you fool." Her tone was mocking, as if she expected my shock to be replaced by laughter, but I couldn't believe a word she said. My disbelief deepened when I noticed another item peeking out from beneath the scattered clothes, a card from the Ritz-Carlton in Nassau. The sight of it was the final blow. There were no more excuses to be made, no more half-truths to salvage the situation. Every piece of evidence, every small detail, painted a picture I wasn't ready to accept. Standing there, red lace panties in one hand and a luxurious invitation in the other, I felt the ground shift beneath me. The air between us grew heavier, filled with unspoken words and the echo of a trust that had been irreparably broken. In that moment, I realized that nothing about this evening, the whispered lies, the carefully hidden secrets, could ever return us to the way things were before. I stood in the middle of our living room, the silence after her latest excuse weighing down on me like a lead blanket. I couldn't let her deceit slide any longer. With a calmness that belied the storm raging inside, I looked at Amanda and said, "Pack your things and go." The words, though simple, carried the finality of a verdict. Her eyes widened in a mix of shock and indignation, and in a desperate attempt to regain control of the situation, she spat out, "You're boring. It wasn't interesting with you?" I barely paused before I grabbed her travel bag from the corner of the room and tossed it onto the bed with a dismissive flick of my wrist. "Get ready," I repeated, my voice steady, my tone leaving no room for negotiation. Without another word, she stormed out, the sound of her hurried footsteps echoing in the empty space she left behind. I sank back onto the couch, a part of me wanting to scream, another part feeling numb with resignation. The pieces of our shattered relationship lay scattered before me, each one a reminder of trust broken and secrets exposed. Then, just when I thought the night might finally give me a moment of solitude to process everything, the doorbell rang. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. It was roughly 15 minutes after Amanda had fled, and the unexpected chime sent a chill down my spine. Who could be here now, at this hour, after all that had just transpired? As I moved slowly toward the door, every step felt laden with the possibility of another twist, a new piece of the puzzle I hadn't even known existed. With my hand hovering over the doorknob, I braced myself for whatever lay on the other side. The steady, unnerving ring of the bell was a stark reminder that, even in the midst of our unraveling, the night wasn't over yet. There was something more waiting, something that promised to add yet another layer to this already convoluted story. The doorbell rang again, echoing down the hall like a final taunt after everything that had happened. I hesitated at the threshold, my heart still reeling from the avalanche of betrayals. Slowly, I cracked the door open, and there he was, Ryan. He stood there with an infuriatingly cheeky grin plastered on his face, his eyes glittering with mischief, as if he'd been waiting for this very moment. "Looks like you had a rough night," he sneered, the words dripping with mockery. His tone was as casual, as if we were old friends sharing a laugh over nothing more than a bad dream. But there was nothing casual about this visit. I didn't waste a second. Silently, resolutely, I closed the door on him. The click of the latch was a small but definitive punctuation mark in the chaos of the evening. A clear boundary he wasn't welcome to cross. In that brief, charged moment, something inside me shifted. Amanda's betrayal wasn't just a series of careless mistakes or random infidelities. It was a calculated game, and Ryan was a piece on her board. As I leaned back against the door, my mind raced. Every twist of the night, from her unervingly upbeat return to the carefully hidden red lace and the Ritz-Carlton card, was now coming together to reveal a larger, more sinister picture. Amanda wasn't just cheating. She was playing me, and now that I'd seen Ryan smirk, it was clear that this wasn't a one-off indiscretion. This was her pattern, a deliberate performance designed to hurt me and keep me off balance. I stood there in the fading light, my thoughts a mix of seething anger and cold determination. I wasn't going to let her win, not by reducing our life together to a series of petty betrayals, and certainly not by being the silent victim of her twisted game. I had been blindsided by her charm and her carefully curated lies for too long. Now, with undeniable evidence piling up and Ryan's unwelcome visit confirming everything, I knew it was time to reclaim control. My mind whirled with questions. Who was Ryan to her? Was he just a fleeting pleasure or something more insidious? Had Amanda been playing me all along, using these encounters as a way to manipulate both our lives? And more importantly, what did I do now that I'd uncovered the full extent of this elaborate deception? The realization was as painful as it was liberating. I wasn't just a pawn in Amanda's game. She had underestimated me for far too long. The door remained firmly shut, a silent declaration that I wasn't going to entertain further intrusions into my shattered world. As the echoes of Ryan's parting steps faded away, I resolved that the next move was mine to make. I wouldn't allow this betrayal to define me, nor would I let Amanda's carefully orchestrated charade spiral out of control. Instead, I would dig deeper into the maze of her secrets and reclaim my narrative, piece by piece. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what lay ahead. The night had been long and brutal, filled with revelations that cut deeper than I'd ever imagined. But as I stood there in the quiet aftermath, I felt a spark of determination ignite within me, a promise that I would not be outplayed. Amanda's game had become a challenge I was unwilling to accept passively. In that moment, A bitter resolve settled over me. I was no longer the man who'd simply sat in the living room, watching the pieces of our life fall apart. I was going to piece them back together on my own terms. Whatever secrets Amanda had left to hide, I was going to expose them. Whatever lies she had woven into the fabric of our shared history, I was going to unravel them until only the truth remained. As I closed my eyes briefly, I pictured the cascading series of events. The cheerful smile that shouldn't have been, the furtive glances, the hidden items, and now, Ryan's smug intrusion. Each detail was a thread in the tapestry of deception that Amanda had meticulously crafted. And just like that, I realized that my next steps would not just be about confronting her infidelity. They would be about understanding the full extent of her betrayal and deciding how to move forward from the ruins of our once shared life. This was more than a betrayal. It was a declaration of war, a twisted contest where every secret was a move, every lie a strategy. And while the sting of the night's revelation still pulsed through me, I knew one thing for certain. I wouldn't let Amanda win. I would fight back, uncover every hidden truth, and ultimately reclaim my dignity. The game was on, and I was ready to play. I wasn't one to let deceit slide, and with every shred of evidence Amanda had left in her wake, I knew it was time for my counterattack. I logged into my email with deliberate calm, despite the tempest of betrayal raging inside me. I composed a message addressed to her boss, attaching the damning photos that left no room for excuses. A snapshot of Amanda at a 5-star resort, laughing away with a stranger, and receipts that showed she'd squandered $15,000 of company money on what she called a business trip. I hit send with a steady hand, knowing this would be the first domino to fall. But I wasn't done yet. My next move was to secure what was left of our shared finances. I immediately blocked her access to our joint account, convinced that this was the only way to stop her from bleeding us dry. However, fate had its own cruel sense of timing. She had already withdrawn $12,000, a last-minute grab that left my heart pounding in frustration and anger. As if that weren't enough, I soon discovered that she had scheduled another massive transfer, a whopping $50,000 destined to vanish into her secret escapades. I scrambled, fingers flying over the keyboard, and managed to cancel the transfer just in time. It was a small victory in the midst of her calculated chaos. The final blow was a call to my lawyer. I calmly informed him that the marriage was over. There was no room for more lies or half-truths in my life. In the aftermath of the call, my phone began to ring incessantly. On one particular call, Amanda's voice trembled on the other end, pleading desperately, "Lucas, please, don't do anything drastic." I didn't even hesitate. "Check your email," I replied in a tone that left no room for negotiation. Moments later, I could almost picture the panic on her face as she read the email. Inside was a formal letter, a summary of every misdeed and betrayal, complete with photos and details that I'd sent not only to her boss but also to several of her colleagues. The evidence was overwhelming, an indisputable record of her abuse of trust and mismanagement of both our finances and her professional responsibilities. The silence that followed on the phone was deafening before she finally erupted, screaming into the receiver, "You ruined my life." Her voice was laced with hysteria and fury, but I couldn't suppress the grim smile that crept across my face. In that charged moment, with every secret laid bare, I knew the scales had finally tipped in my favor. "No, Amanda, you ruined it yourself," I said softly, the words hanging in the air like a verdict. It wasn't just about infidelity anymore. It was about the destruction of the life we'd built together, piece by deceptive piece. Every lie, every stolen moment of pleasure at someone else's expense, had led to this irrevocable moment of truth. As I hung up the phone, the weight of what had just transpired settled in. I was stepping into a new chapter, one where I wouldn't be manipulated or outplayed any longer. Amanda's game had been elaborate, but now the cards were on the table, and the damage was done. I had taken control, and in doing so, I reclaimed not just my money or my dignity, but the narrative of our lives. The game was over, and this time, I had emerged victorious.